sorry we're running a little late because we had some meetings beforehand. We will start with item 1.0, 1.1, the consent agenda. We have a motion on that. Mrs. Bush,
I motion to approve the consent agenda.
is there a second? Mr. Bull,
Second.
are there any items that, Mrs. Zarn?
I'd like to pull item C, please.
Anyone else want to pull anything? I'd just like to pull item G. Okay, there's a vote on the floor, or excuse me, a motion on the floor to approve the other items, which would be A, B, D, E, F, H, and I. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Okay, now we move on to item 1.1C. Mrs. Zarn.
It's just a name correction on page 5 of those minutes. The gentleman who spoke to us is Jordan Sheck.
On that one, I also have a change on page 7. Where it says, I was unable to attend Center Roads PTO, I was at Center Roads PTO. So do we have a motion to approve the minutes of January 27th with the amendments? Mrs. Zarn.
So moved.
Second. Mr. Hool.
Second.
Any further additions, deletions, or corrections? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Since I pulled item G, that was just on page 6. There's a typo at the bottom of the page where it says there was a motion to unable the motion. It was really to untable the motion. It's okay. Does anyone have anything else for that agenda or excuse me, minute? Okay, we have a motion to approve that with the amendment. Mr. Holt,
Motion to approve item G with the amendment.
is there a second? Mrs. Bush?
Second.
Any other further additions, deletions, or corrections? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, now we'll move on to item 2.0, 2.1, opportunity for the Board of Education to add or delete agenda items. Anyone would like to add or delete an agenda item tonight? Mrs. Arndt?
I'd like to move to add a brief discussion of the Connecticut State Department of Education annual report on the use of physical restraint and seclusion that was included in our information. Voice to the pastor.
Second? Any discussion? I would just like to ask if we might want to put this on a future agenda in case we need Mrs. Buell or anyone else to prepare for any questions.
Ready to answer.
We're not ready to answer, so would it be all right to put it? Mrs. Buell, are you ready to answer questions on that? Or would it be better if we did it at a future meeting?
The state. Yes.
Okay. Mr. Kemp? Okay.
Oh, we're not, are we voting on it?
Not yet, no. I thought you had a comment to make.
Well, the reason why I seconded it, I also wanted to add this evening. I don't, at least the nature of my questions, I don't think are such that it would require any time to get back to, at least me. They're simply clarification as to what some of it means, because it's very, very detailed information, and it might be easily addressed this evening. If not, then some of the questions or materials could be brought back to us at a later date, but I just assume add it to tonight's agenda.
Mrs. Arndt?
I prefer that the discussion take place this evening as well, and if there's information that can't be provided to us, we can always add it to the future, but I don't have questions that I think would be particularly in-depth.
All right, we have a motion on the floor to add this discussion onto the agenda, and it would be item 5.2. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Now we'll move on to item 2.2, Rockville High School student representatives. You're up, Mrs. Young.
I'm wondering if we could also get an update on Maple Street Schools, school governance committee status
When we can
in the form of a motion.
Okay, is there a second on that? Mr. Stansel? I believe that should be a future agenda item, not tonight. Oh, you can address that one,
This
okay?
afternoon, but-
All right, I'm sorry, I did not know that, okay. Then all those in favor? This will be 5.3, yes, sorry. It's unanimous. Sorry. Write this down. Okay. Any other items to add or delete from the agenda tonight? Mrs. Owen?
I just have a question about what was in our packet as a proposed agenda item. Is that expected that it would be added to tonight's agenda?
What was that? What was that? I don't have that.
Is that from a
Memorandum of agreement?
previous-
Oh, that was from a previous meeting.
I didn't miss anything, this is the first I've seen it. Okay.
That was for supervisor's contract? That was 2 meetings ago. Okay, any other things to add or delete? Okay, item 2.2, Rockville High School Student Representative Report. Vernon or Olivia, who would like to go first?
Good evening. Please excuse my voice for I'm getting over a cold, so I don't know if it'll crack or just go away. But just, if you have any questions as to what I say, I'll gladly repeat it. So recently, Mrs. White, one of our head math teachers, left and retired. And a lot of people were sad to see her go. A lot of kids have very strong connections with her, especially my grade, since she has followed us up the ranks through our senior year. And a lot of the AP statistics kids are nervous, seeing as the long-term stuff, they don't really have a feel for them yet. And, they're waiting to see how things play out. So they're really hoping that it doesn't affect their AP scores. And so we'll wait to see how that goes. But a lot of us were really sad to see her go. We had the all-state auditions, and that was really successful. We're waiting to see cutoff scores, but we'll let you know if any of us get in. The murder mystery was a success. There was a high attendance on both nights, and it was such a well-written play, and all the students loved it. And I think it's a very good example of how our student body is producing some great works of writing and art, and it's just one example of the many talented students we have. I'd like to thank everyone who spoke up and for the library assistant position that was on the chopping block. Personally, I know the library is like a home to myself, but not only that, I think that without that one library assistant, you would be knowing any sort of resource students see within the library. Because it wouldn't be able to be open as long during lunch breaks or before and after school. And we already are struggling to get new books into the library. And so getting rid of a librarian would only be a waste of the money that you put into this library. So I think that keeping this library assistant would, that is definitely the best way to go. Scholarships, seniors, it's that time of year. Things are done with college apps, so it's easy going, but it's not. Although the guidance department has been very helpful. Any students who go up there and ask questions, I know I went to mine and we sat and we talked and figured everything out. And so, and also an advisory, we did receive a letter or a paper telling us what to do. And book club is tomorrow, and I know we're all really excited. And we have a couple upcoming authors that we'll be visiting or Skyping with. We were trying to Skype with one the other day, and it didn't quite work out. I was in school today, so I didn't get to find out why, but I'm sure we'll be Skyping with them soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Olivia? Thank you very much. Aaron?
So tonight I have one major theme that I've heard a lot of concern around, the smarter balance testing, and I just have a few questions concerning it. With this test coming up that kids are not prepared for, I just wonder why we're trying to switch to it so quickly when we have the cap that we can do, that we've been prepared for. And a lot of juniors have been voicing concern as to why we're taking the test this year as well, when we took it last year.
Have you spoken with Mr. Rocket yet? No? With these questions? Oh, okay. Because I'm sure he has the answers for you. We have moved to the Smarter Balance test because the CAPT is no longer testing what we do. Unfortunately, your class is caught in between because the test is moving to grade 11. So this year, both grade 10 and 11 are going to be taking Smarter Balance. Next year, the 10th graders, this year's 10th graders, will be taking it again as 11th graders. So we will get actually student information back. It won't be till next January, however, so you will get it before you graduate, information on how at this point of the year, last year, you were meeting the standards. So that's a very good point. Get some information back.
From my understanding, I had heard that we could opt to take the CAP next year. That's what I had heard, not sure if that was true or not. But from the experience of taking the Smarter Balance last year, I don't think any of the 10th graders this year are going to be able to take it next year. I could barely answer any of those questions, and I'm a fairly advanced math student, so I don't know what most of the students are going to be able to do.
And in actuality, that's a good thing. The CAP test is not going to give you any information about where you need to go. And so this certainly gives you a roadmap of what you need to be doing next. So it's a very good test. It's testing the information and the skills and abilities we want all of our students to have. So that's why we're changing. We're kind of flying the plane and building it at the same time. So we are changing our teaching to make things, the students do the work, construct their learning. There's a huge difference moving to the Common Core state standards in this. And I know it's not easy. It's not easy for teachers either, but I think it's probably harder for you. I understand that. But it's CAP would not, and CMTs, we're not doing CMTs at the lower levels either, except for science, which I'm sure you know, in the appropriate grades. So I think that it would not have given us any information that would have been useful to us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Erin.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Aaron? Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to item 3.0, community forum. This is an opportunity for comments on agenda items, potential future agenda items, or general information provided to the board from citizens and community organizations. Is there anyone who wishes to address the board this evening? Please state your name and address.
Is that called yet? Sorry. Tommy Damamero, 138 Grove Street. It is disheartening for me to sit here as a parent and listen to a student tell you that they do not feel prepared to take the Smart Balance test. I hope everyone heard him say that. But yet we're pushing it anyway. We have kids who feel ill-prepared to take a test that it's being decided whether you know the information, but yet we haven't really prepared them. I'm not really sure why we jumped to take the Smart Balance test in this district this year when you could have taken the CMT, it was an option, or the CAP. I think that we're asking students to give us data that really isn't fair for them to have to do. And I'm gonna ask you, it was asked at the Center Road meeting, this district needs to hold a forum on Common Core. It needs to. Your parents are not informed. I run a Facebook page. It's called PACT. Please join it if you're on Facebook. You don't have to participate. You can just read what people write. There is a lot of misinformation about Common Core and what the expectations are, but it's very concerning to me as a parent to hear a child tell you that they took it last year and they didn't feel they could take it and they were in advanced math class. So either our curriculum isn't lined up to Smart Balance yet, which is my guess because it's just rolled out, but yet we're making kids take a test and then they don't get the information until January. How is that helping us? Why are we putting the cart so fast? Like, I feel like we should have phased this in. And I'm asking this board to get a forum together, whether you have to do it in small little groups and advertise it, spend the money to do that, but you need to really communicate to your parents on what Common Core means for their kids. Thanks.
I believe Mr. Bird is putting together an evening in March, hopefully, that will address Common Core questions for parents and anyone from the community if they're interested. Thank you. Anyone else wish to address the board this evening? Okay, we'll move on to item 4.0, for curriculum 4.1, curriculum committee report. Mrs. Bush.
Yes, the curriculum committee met just before this meeting, and we reviewed the new curriculum they're putting forward for the high school. And we listened, and I truly believe that after listening to Mr. Rocket, Mrs. Vernon, that the high school is really on the right path to prepare our students and to excite the kids for learning. And after all the review, our curriculum committee very, very enthusiastically support the new course offerings and the new curriculum. And there was a lot to digest, but we really feel that this is really the way the high school needs to go. Questions? I know we have people here to answer.
Does anybody have any questions on the curriculum?
Oh,
pack?
it was a motion. That was, I'll just make the motion. I make a motion that we adopt the new curriculum and approve the new courses and the course changes that we have in our packet.
Is there a second? Mrs. Arden.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments? Mr. Kemp?
The changes that are being brought forward should also include course drops, which I was looking for and didn't easily find in the packet that I have in front of me. So insofar as that's concerned, are there any deletions that would take that would be a result of the additions that are being proposed?
As far as, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, as far as I'm concerned, I could learn is that they're only going to be deleting journalism because publications will be covering what's done in journalism. But these courses are in addition, and they will only run if enough students sign up for the courses.
Well, I don't mind supporting a new idea, but usually in the past we've been presented with how you're going to fit that into the day, and that usually required the deletion of some courses that were in existence at the time. And then in addition, there is always the question of what is the fiscal impact of the addition of courses. Does it require additional staff? Does it require materials, et cetera? And that's what I need to understand.
I think I'd call Mr. Rocket and Mrs. Merriman to help address this.
Thank you, and while they're coming, if you don't mind,
No, please, go ahead.
through you. In the negotiated contract with the teachers, they'll now be teaching 6 courses instead of 5. When you have a staff of 80 teachers, that's an additional 8 classes for no extra funding at all, 80 classes. And so many of these classes were encouraging students not to be in study halls, to take more courses, to explore careers and college opportunities. And so we have an opportunity to add 80 classes for our kids without any more funding because of the change in the contract. So,
Well, if I might, that might easily cover the people cost of it, but then the material cost of providing additional courses, there would be some expenditures there, I would think.
Mr. Rocket?
But most importantly, where do you propose to do this during the course of the typical school day?
As you may have picked up from reviewing the packet, most of those new course proposals are part of our college and career pathway exploratory courses and are a 1 quarter long, not a semester, a quarter. That and we've reformatted some of our existing health and PE courses that will free up a quarter here and a quarter there for kids. Instead of taking something, for example, for 9th grade PE for a semester, we're chunking things like that up into a quarter so kids can take them at more convenient times to offset other exploratory courses. And of course, the further you get along, the more space opens up for electives as you move forward throughout your high school career. In terms of the cost aspect, there's one explicit cost, and that's textbooks for biology, where we're offering, it's not exactly this program, but it's the science scholars you'll hear about in a moment, that has a cost of, if we get a bunch of students extra in 9th grade taking biology, that is an explicit cost because we have to buy more textbooks for them. The rest of them we view as implicit costs. We don't believe we'll need more teachers to teach them because they are getting extra sessions. There is some nominal cost for supplies, but I'm letting the departments take care of that themselves, how they allocate it within the context of their departmental supplies. There'll be some professional development that will have to do really in the nature of curriculum writing for some of these courses, but we plan to do that with the existing structures that the assistant superintendent has set up for us, early release days, the end of year curriculum time, which has been budgeted for already, the full day release days, etc. So we don't see much cost for these courses.
Anyone else have any questions? Mr. Kemp?
Do you think our current block scheduling format of our day is ideal given the changes that you want to make?
At the high school, we talked about a number of things that we as an institution have to look at over time. Examples might be our grading system. Every good institution, including Rockville High, should on a regular basis examine our grading policy. Does it fit what we want for our students and where we want them to go? Part of such review would include an examination of our schedule. And in my mind, we put that out there and we don't try and justify what we have. What we do is we say, this is where our kids need to be and where we want them to be. Does our current scheduling mechanism get them there, right? So we will look at that. It won't be this year. That's a long, extensive process. I'll tell you that all of the changes we've done are with the block scheduling in mind, and I personally happen to be a fan of it. It could be in our discussions that it doesn't stay that way, but that discussion wouldn't take place this year. It would maybe start next year.
There are various forms of the block, as you know, and far more than I ever envisioned when we adopted it some years ago. Do you see any variation of the block emerging that you might prefer?
Potentially, but that's really as far as I can say. Again, what I would want my department chairs to do is say, this is where we want our kids to be and what's the best schedule to get them there. I'll tell you that we've already used some flexibility in the block scheduling. For example, we have some math interventions that are essentially a mini block, where kids might have a study hall, for example, and we have scheduled them for an intervention, and we've taken the interventions and done intervention like period 2A and 2B. And so we pulled them out of their study hall for half a period of intervention, and then pulled another group out for the second half. So it's essentially a mini block. So even in the context of our current structure, we do have flexibility. Whether we stay that way in the future, we'll address that question very fully in the future.
Mr. Holt?
The question I had was regarding the courses that you're attempting to obtain grant monies for to do curriculum, rather specialized courses. If you don't get the grant money, does that affect the ability to add those courses, or do you have other thoughts on how you could fund building that curriculum? I'm not aware of any courses that are totally reliant on grant funding.
I believe the Family Consumer Science Department is looking at obtaining some grant money to facilitate the curriculum writing, but I know Mr. Burt had also added time and frame.
Right, that was the issue we talked about, I think, in committee, yeah, that she had put down X number of FTEs and grant money, and I think that was just lack of familiarity with how we're going to structure it going forward. We don't need extra people, really. The concept is we have, say, 8 new family consumer science courses. The ones that kids sign up for are the ones we'll shift existing teachers to teach. Some courses we might not offer because the sign-ups aren't sufficient to support it.
Anybody else have any questions? Okay, thank you very much. We have a motion on the floor to approve the curriculum as presented. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank everyone at the high school for all their hard work. Now we'll move on to item 4.1A, Science Scholars Program Presentation. Mr. Rodgers.
So while Ted is setting that up, I'll distribute, I don't know exactly what materials might have got, so I'm just going to distribute some general supporting materials for you. Oh, thanks, Steve. Okay, thank you so much. I'm waiting. Okay, thank you. So just a little bit of context, if I could, to start. All the curriculum matters that we submitted to you early really are one approach, the main approach that we hope to take in transforming Rockville High School. And that's where 9th and 10th grade students especially get an option to explore many different content areas and subject areas to find those of specific interest to them. This program, the Science Scholars Program, takes a little bit different approach for a specific reason. We know that there's some kids who already know that they love science. I will say that this program has nothing to do with the fact that all 3 of your high school science administrators are science teachers. It's totally irrelevant. But we know that even in middle school, there's a lot of kids that love science. And we want to attract those kids. And again, we know that we are in, as we said at the curriculum committee, a dogfight with other schools to give a good reason for kids to stay here. And we think this program, in context, does 2 things. One, it satisfies those kids that just like science. And the other is it has a great potential for high-end students to amass many credits along the way. And you'll see that it's specifically based on, it ends in various inquiry learning kinds of things. So I have with me tonight your assistant principal at the high school, Ted Brewer, and of course Kim Marinan, your director of school counseling. I'll mention a couple of things about the program, then I'll turn it over to Ted to go over some specifics, and Kim to pick up where Ted and I have dropped the ball. The program is pretty straightforward, as you can see. We talked about things like, should we have entrance requirements? Should there be a minimum math score or grade in science, etc.? But really, we want to move away from that. We will make it clear to kids that it's a demanding course. We have that right above the signature line on our application. You'll notice that our application does not have things like, what was your grade in 7th and 8th grade science? How did you do on your math CNT? We expect this to get demanding, But our new approach at the high school is try it. If you like science, dive in there and we'll help you get there. We're not blowing sunshine at them, and we're not going to say you'll love it, it's easy. What we're going to say is you'll love it and it's going to be pretty demanding. And we're going to make that clear right up front. Science in general is demanding, and as you can see from the course flow, it gets more so moving along. We have a guesstimate. We expect 40 or so kids to sign up, and invariably that will drop. I would anticipate 5 to 10 might see it all the way through, but that would be 5 to 10 kids to walk out of here with numerous credits, having extensive experience in science. We think it would make graduates of this program, so to speak, be very attractive to colleges. In terms of the 3 possible pathways they might take, that's the diagram we put on the board for the audience. And you can see that in general, there's 3 options: the physical science option, life science option, and the independent study option. I don't think we need to go through these. They're self-explanatory. They're just focuses. We are going to make clear to kids you may design your own program as you go through. We treat them as simply as guidelines for kids. But the expectation is that they would take not less than 1.5 sciences per year. We'll make it clear that this probably will preclude other options for them. And I don't know if Mr. Gussie's back there, but as soon as we talked about this, he said, hey, how about an English Scholars Program? And we kind of might think about something like that also. So let me turn it over to Ted, and he can talk about some of the teaching aspects of this. Ted?
I think from the teacher's perspective, over the years, we've had a number of students that the teachers felt had the capacity to double up, as we used to call it, on science courses throughout the year. We hadn't historically given them the opportunity during freshman year to do that. And then we were kind of left at the last minute to kind of select those kids and kind of push them. And to be honest, I think the kids look at it as quite a challenge. And we're kind of reluctant to do that. I think in doing an approach like this, it's going to provide us kind of a clearly identified path for the students 1 year earlier, so that they wouldn't pick this up as sophomores, but start as freshmen, have the opportunity to take biology as freshmen, which is new to us. And also potentially have a cohort of students going forward that they can kind of build relationships with other students that are in this boat, that are interested in science and taking this leap forward and doubling up on some of these courses in what is admittedly a very rigorous schedule. I think that having kind of a reward of some sort of a certificate designation at the end that we can kind of offer the students, I think is an additional incentive to get those students to reach and push themselves in the direction that we've wanted them to go for years. And as Mr. Rocket said, the notion that the science department would be kind of a model for other groups perhaps adopting a similar model going forward, I think they're very excited about. I would also say that from a teacher's perspective, our teachers have become increasingly adept in recent years, differentiating instruction. When we moved in our levels away from a general level biology in recent years, I think our teachers have gotten kind of a quick on-the-job training in how they're going to incorporate different students into that college biology class. And we have a group of faculty, I think, that are very willing to take that challenge and differentiate those courses to allow those kids the maximal access to science classes throughout their stay at Rockville.
Does anybody have any questions? Mr. Stanson?
Thank you. This is excellent, and I absolutely love the idea. I just have a couple quick questions, I hope. The first, I guess, kind of surprised me. Did I understand you correctly that we don't allow freshmen to take college biology anymore?
We haven't for some time. There have been some students that come in from other systems that may have taken courses in a different sequence, but it's not something that we've traditionally offered to ninth graders. There's been a very small number of students that have tried it, but it's traditionally been something that they take earth science in ninth grade and then would move to biology in grade 10.
Remember, though, that previously we had the science cap, and while there were some hot runners in middle school that might have absorbed enough science to be prepared from cap, the original thinking was that ninth grade science went over a bunch of the core items of knowledge that they needed to do in preparation for cap, so that was a factor.
Thank you. I'm glad we're bringing it back. I think it's unfortunate that we couldn't do it. I know I enjoyed doing it as a ninth grader at Rockville. So
As did I, so it's definitely a change for us, but it has been a long time in the past.
all right. And then my second question was on the other science option. Have you considered allowing any of the ag ed courses to count for the other science?
Yeah, well, very, very definitely done that. We've made specific inquiries with UConn, and what I expect going forward is some of those will count. I'm writing letters now to get two of our teachers, Ms. Harlow and Cal, ECE certified, and in my mind, the plant science, the animal science, those are science courses, so very definitely.
Excellent, thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions? Mr. Holman?
It's not as much of a question, it's more of a, I encourage Mr. Gussie to go forward with that English one. I really think that's a great idea. Keep pushing for this type of program. I really like the theme.
I agree. Okay, well, thank you very much, and thank you for bringing this forward. We look forward to hearing about it and how successful it is.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, we will now move on to item 5.0, general business. 5.1, Board of Education Finance Committee report.
Good evening. Prior to the meeting tonight, we had a finance meeting, and they're rather abbreviated one, so the details are a little fuzzy at the moment. But anyway, moving right ahead, in your packages, Exhibit A, we have a budget worksheet, which was the one we approved at our last meeting for the budget workshop. And that was the amount of $810,000. I can't read the rest of it.
303.
303. And it's presented to the mayor, and it's in Exhibit B that we have a letter from Dr. Conway for the capital expenditure plan. And if Mr. Picard wants to jump in at any point, any important points I'm missing, I'd appreciate it. Okay, Exhibit C, our encumbrances to date are 96.3%. Then the line by line on the munis on Exhibit D. Exhibit E is the magnet school tuition to date as of January 2014. My understanding is, based on our reports, is that we're doing a little bit better in regard to the overall numbers that we had anticipated in the past. Moving right along, Exhibit F and G are interrelated, and this is the special education guidance from the state of Connecticut, and our numbers. And I don't know if you want to expand that.
Mr. Colleen, if you don't mind, through the chair, if maybe Mrs. Buell and Mr. Porcaro want to do this one, I think it takes some
Explanation.
deeper level of explaining. I know that everybody, the finance committee gets it at this point, so they may be able to answer some more questions. So, Mr. Porcaro, do you want to start at your level, and then Mrs. Buell can drill down a little deeper there? Thank you.
Through
you, Madam Chair. Let me just start, if I can expand on something that Mr. Kalina had said, because it'll be a reference in the update when we look at the total budget. The year-to-date in Exhibit D in your packet, and it's also reflected in the executive summary as well in Exhibit C, shows that we have expended to date, and that is expended as well as encumbered, a total amount of funding that equals 96.83% of our total budget, leaving an available balance of $1,603,089.83 for the rest of the fiscal year. So in comparison to years past, which is part of the reason why we're in the budget freeze at the present time, is because that is obviously not a lot of money to get us through to the end of the year. But let me help put that into more perspective as we look at one of our risk accounts, which is the special education account. So if I may start, big picture by way of process, what you have before you in Exhibit G is an estimate of revenue from the State Department of Education. We receive these estimates 3 times per year. The first one that we receive is preliminary. That was received in November and December. The next one we just received last week, and that's the one presented before you today. And the final one that we receive is in April, which gives us the most exact estimation of the amount of revenue that we expect to receive from the State Department of Education. When we talk about revenue from the State Department of Education, we're referring to the Education Cost Sharing Grant. That is the total amount of funding that goes to the town of Vernon to help offset our budget. That includes, in the report that you'll see in the following pages from the State Department of Education, our Alliance District funding. It includes public and non-public transportation, adult education and health services grants, as well as our special education excess cost grant reimbursement. So just by way of clarification for some of the newer members and from folks in the public, when you hear ECS, you have to be specific. It's education cost sharing. Big grant goes to the town. We'll see that in the number second. Special education excess costs, sometimes also referred to as ECS, is our special education reimbursement amounts. When we look at our special education reimbursement amounts, that is based on a form, it's called the CDEC-G, which includes all of our special education services that Mrs. Buell can explain in a little bit more detail. And that's what drives the special education excess cost reimbursement amounts. So if I can draw your attention to the next page behind the memo from the State Department of Education, we can look at some of those numbers and we can compare them to what the projected revenue estimates were from the Board of Ed as well as from the town of Vernon, which are also included in your packet on the back of Exhibit H. We'll start with the ECS entitlement in the amount of $19,047,379. And keep in mind that includes the Alliance District grant funding. That's right on target with the projections for both ECS, including the Alliance District. As we go down the list, public transportation entitlement is a couple $1,000s higher at this point in time than what we have in our revenue estimates. The next one is the Special Education Excess Cost Grant, and that's both Grant Type 1 and Grant Type 2. So if we were to add those two together, the total at this point in time would be $1,282,540. And if I can draw your attention to the next page, this is the first time the state's done this, because it's a question they always get after these revenue reports are released. They've given a breakdown of where those funds are coming from. So specifically, we'll start with column 1, the uncapped entitlement. That is if the Board of Education, this is for all boards of education who participate and submit these forms for reimbursement purposes, were to get 100% of the costs, the expenditures that they had submitted to the State Department of Education through this grant, that would be the amount that we received. However, as we all know, this is a capped entitlement, meaning that there's only a set amount of funds that's pooled available for all the districts that participate. So the next column you'll see is the capped entitlement. So that represents an 18.01% reduction of the full entitlement if the funds were available to us. So in essence, we're receiving at this point in time, based upon the pool of funds available, an 81.99% reimbursement on our special education excess cost expenditures that we've submitted. I do expect this to go down significantly, as we've seen in years past, and the reason behind that is because most of the larger municipalities, the larger school districts, the Hartford, Waterbury, Danbury, and so forth, They submit the bulk of their billing in the fourth quarter of the fiscal year, which significantly reduces the availability of funds in this entitlement. And so I would expect that our reimbursement rate for this year to be much lower than the 81.99%, probably 75 to 78%, which in comparison is relatively high, but we're dealing with potentially a smaller amount of funds available. The other thing of note is, if you recall, I've reported this in a couple of the previous Finance Committee meetings, the student-based supplement funding that was typically a separate entitlement, separate grant, that would typically go to the town of Vernon in the amount of $128,580 is included now in the excess cost reimbursement entitlement. So that actually works against us, looking at it from a bottom line dollar standpoint, because it is the expectation that those funds would be going to the town as submitted in the revenue estimates from the town. So we have to back that out of our total. So my focus is on the local budget, and looking at it from a local budget standpoint, if we take that $1.282 million and change in expected revenue, and again, we have to factor in it's going to be lower than that, and we compare it to what our actual expenses and encumbrances are in our special education line items, which are reflected in your year-to-date budget report, and that equals $1,529,049.07 in the negative. We're looking at a difference of minus $246,509.07. We have to also take out that $128,580 for the student-based supplement, giving us a total of negative $375,089.07. So if you ask why we're in a budget freeze, that's the main reason why, that's our main driver there, as far as what we're doing to control that deficit in this particular risk account.
Mr. Kemp?
Michael, I'm trying to stay with you here. The $1.5 million that you just referred to,
Yes, sir.
where is that, please?
If you look in the year-to-date budget report, and that is Exhibit D, I believe, in your handouts.
I'm sorry, which one?
Yep, Exhibit D, and if you turn to page 3, and if you look at, do you have the year-to-date budget report in the finance? D, Exhibit D, yep. And if you look at, on page 3, object code 55810, tuition to other LEAs, and 55820, tuition non-public school, those two amounts to negative $428,985.27, and the negative $1,100,063.80, give you the total that we're currently experiencing. And those numbers, again, reflective of our actual expenses and our encumbrances to the end of the year. And again, the encumbrances reflect what we project to spend and need to spend to get us through to the end of the fiscal year. So if you add those two together, that gives us the negative $1.529 million and change.
Okay, now that I'm with you on the $1.5 million, would you pick it up from there, please?
Okay, so if we look at the minus $1,529,000, what I'm looking at is the projected revenue next, that we're getting these numbers from the State Department of Education, and that's the $1.282 million back in reimbursement. So if we take that and offset it against the 1.5, that's what's giving us the negative $246,000 and change. But remember, that revenue of the $1.282 million, Mr. Kemp, includes that student-based supplement. So we have to back that out as well, which is how I come up with, again, our projection for these accounts through the end of the year, based upon the actual budget, our expenses and encumbrances through the end of the year, factoring in the State Department of Education's revenue. And again, it's going to be a little bit lower, so I don't want to say it's going to be exactly $375,000. That number will actually go up a little bit, assuming that our reimbursement rate and the availability of funds in that entitlement will become less in April when we receive our next revenue update. At this present time, based upon the numbers we do have, we're looking at a negative balance of $375,089.07 in those two accounts. However, through the budget freeze, and you look at the rest of the budget, and again, we're not looking at the spreadsheet from the special ed program at the present time, but looking at the actual budget itself, when we look at what our encumbrances and our expenses are and our remaining balance, if our encumbrances hold true, especially in our risk accounts like special education, then I expect that we will finish the year. It will be tight. We will need to continue the budget freeze through the end of the year as we've discussed, but I expect that we will finish the year in the black.
Mr. Stansky?
Assuming that we won't get 81 point whatever percent, and then instead we're going to get the 78% or lower, have you run those numbers to see how much that's going to impact the deficit?
Through you, Madam Chair. At this point in time, I'm expecting that we'll have about a $300,000 buffer, assuming our encumbrances stay the same. So we should be able to absorb a lower expected reimbursement percentage in this particular account.
Mr. Stansel?
And I guess one additional question. We always budget special education assuming the worst in terms of reimbursement, which is significantly lower than 81 or 78%. It's somewhere in the 60s, I believe, we budget for. So I find it troubling that this is the third year in a row now that we're going to be running a deficit, and we budget assuming the worst. So I think we need to think about our budgeting stance with special education.
Mrs. Arndt?
Well, I was going to go one step further. Is this compared to through you, Ann, is this compared to last year we had like a $1.3 million gap to close for special ed expenses, and the year before that it was another large dollar amount? Is this the same information? That's where we're going, Michael, with what you're telling us?
Through you, Madam Chair. I think this is a contributing factor to our deficit as far as how the budget projections are working, and working as far as how it's going to end at the end of the fiscal year, looking at the local budget. But at this point in time, our local budget, I believe, again, assuming our encumbrances and our risk accounts like special education hold true, that we will finish in the black for this fiscal year, which is a little bit different experience that we had in the past, but it is also a primary driver as to why we're in a budget freeze at the moment.
And it's special ed. It always comes back to special ed, yes?
For the past couple of fiscal years, that has been a primary driver through you, Madam Chair.
I know most of our budgeting is best guess, but we seem to always be off significantly in special education. Is there a reason for that? Other than what we've always been told is kids come and go and all that, but having history to help guide the budget process, I'm wondering, I guess for Mrs. Buell, why we're so off. Yes.
If I could add just before Mrs. Buell adds. 2 years ago, I don't recall ending in the black in special ed. So last year, absolutely, we went from 35 students budgeted for to 64 out of district. So obviously, they almost doubled. So that was the issue last year. This year, we're within what we expected. We expected the reimbursement to come in. So this year, it's a different issue, the way I see it, that the reimbursement is coming in significantly less than what we put in for. That Mrs. Buell has given us information that she believes that there are costs that the state has said no longer qualify. She put a call in to them as soon as we got this letter on Friday to say what doesn't qualify, because we gave you everything we always give you, and we've always gotten reimbursement for these items. So whether it's transportation or out of district tuition. So I know Mrs. Buell is waiting for that, have that conversation. So 2 years ago, we were not in the red. Last year, it was the number of students. This year, we're not sure at this point, except that the reimbursement is far off from what we put in for and what we expected. We would not be in this situation at all if we had received exactly what we put in for, even at the 65% mark. So I just wanted to kind of give that overview before Mrs. Buell. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think you've answered it well. Certainly, the letter that was received by Dr. Conway and Mr. Caro was received, I became aware of it on Friday. We clearly were alarmed by the information. Mr. Caro had already called the State Department to ask, to inquire, why the numbers were the way they were. And they explained to him about some, when we submit the numbers, there are some filters that they, again, determined that there were certain portions of what we submitted were not reimbursable. And so we have, my department, I have called to follow up to get some more clarification on that. The way we've submitted in the past is the way we submitted again this year. So at this point, we do have another opportunity to submit. That's part of the process. But we're trying to get some clarification as to why they filtered some amounts out and said we're not qualifying for reimbursement. So as soon as we find out some more information, we'll certainly make that available.
Mr. Kemp?
The filters that you refer to, I take it they're not unique to Vernon, so we must be, Vernon must be filtered in the same manner that other towns are being filtered. And if that's, and that's, I assume that's not unique to this particular fiscal year either. So these filters must be a known entity that the state should be in a position to share information about up front so that we can prepare to react to those filters. Whether they're good ones or bad ones, I have no idea what they are. So, given that we're not the only town the state is reporting, you said in 3 stages, this month and then once again in April, to what extent are we experiencing a similar difference as other towns may be experiencing? In other words, we're sitting here as a board trying to wrestle with a discrepancy of dollars that are very significant. I mean, my numbers, I'm not good at this, it was around 500,000. Now what Michael just said was, when you're done, it's 374,000. So, okay, that's still 500, 374, it's a big number. To what extent should we be able to anticipate this kind of differential from the state so that we're not sitting here at this point in February worried that we're going to come up significantly short? Can you help me with this? Because I'm sure Tolland and the rest of the towns are experiencing the same kind of filters and the same kind of vague data from the state as this letter indicates.
I think that when we get some specific information, I'll have a better answer for that. I don't know why this year is different than last year and why there is such a large discrepancy with what we requested and what we anticipate in return. So, you know, I certainly look forward to having a clearer answer for you. I don't have one for you tonight, but I can assure you that we're asking, and we'll continue to ask until we have some information which will help us to project. I mean, these projections have been in place since last year when we built the budget. So certainly, if I am projecting incorrectly, then I want to clarify that so that we're not in this situation.
Well, what do your peers around the state have to say about the way the state reports to you?
I have not had a conversation with my peers. This came to light Friday afternoon for me. So I have not had any conversation with any peers. You know, I meet with them once a month. I have a small group of folks that I'll connect with, but I will ask to see if anyone else is experiencing the same type of situation.
Well, we had a similar experience last year. And so even though this year's data you just got, we had a similar scenario of different dollar amounts. I'm not sure what the reasons were. But it seems like there's a disconnect between what the state chooses to share with us. And yes, the reimbursement rates will change based on whatever's they want to do to us. They're certainly not going to ever give us 100%, I got that part. But we can't go through this year, and we can't go through this next year. And so the next question I would have is, in your projections for the forthcoming budget that we're presenting to the town any day now, is the data in that budget reflect a more accurate picture than what we're seeing this year?
So I'd like to first start by talking about the number that you talked about last year. Part of last year's issue was a significant number of students that were outplaced, which were never budgeted for, so could not anticipate reimbursement or the initial cost, the 4.5 times per pupil expenditure that we had to pay out. So there were a large number of students that required different level of programming. So just from the beginning, whether there was any excess or 100% excess came back to us, it didn't matter because we just didn't plan for that number of students. So that was last year's number. It's different than what I'm understanding to be this year. And so last year's number was huge. This year's number is still large, but it's a different situation. So I think part of that is what I'm hoping to get an answer for. So, you know, when I come before you year after year and tell you what I think the cost of special education is, I use the same projections year after year for you. And I tell you, based on the number of students that I have enrolled in December, this is what I think the projection for our tuition costs will be for the coming year. I take every single child, I factor out the students that are graduating, you know, any changes, that sort of thing. And so that's how we build the budget every year. So when you say, are we ready for next year, you know, the budget that just went to the mayor, I would say to you that I don't know what unique filters, if there was some kind of system that the state used this year to disqualify certain expenses. I don't know what those are yet, but I wouldn't have known to not factor them in for next year's budget, the one that's sitting in the mayor's office right now. So I guess what I'm saying to you is I built the budget based on the way we've projected in the past as well.
Mr. Boone?
So what I'm hearing you say is the rules have changed. We haven't gotten the new rule sheet yet, and that's what you're trying to get the information from the state on. What is it that they've changed that's impacting your projections?
That's correct.
So it's not, you know, we can't play the game if we don't know what the rules are, Dave, and that's what she's trying to nail down. And it's costing us hundreds of thousands of dollars at this point.
Mr. Stansel?
Through you, Madam Chair. Just one question, either for Dr. Conway or Ms. Buell. Just so I have this straight in my mind, because I think this is where I was struggling before. We're saying currently we're projected an 81% reimbursement of the expenses that they're reimbursing, but that there are additional expenses that we've submitted that they're not going to reimburse at all.
That's correct.
Thank you, okay. There was a gap there.
Anybody else have any questions? No, you've already had 2 turns, David.
Yes, Michael, you...
David,
I'm sorry.
you've already had your 2 turns. Those are the rules we set.
What, 2 turns at what?
Asking questions. Sorry.
So Mr. Picara, you're guessing, or right now, based on right now numbers, the deficit in the budget is $375,000.
Through you, Madam Chair, for the special education
Right.
line items only, not our total budget.
Right, just for special ed.
Yes, ma'am.
You're also suggesting that, that you expect to end up in the black. Where, how?
Budget, through you, Madam Chair, through the continued budget freeze, we'll have to continue to enforce that through the end of the fiscal year. So items that were budgeted for will remain frozen, positions that we are posting are mission critical only. So those would be the areas that we would be taking those funds to offset the deficit in this line item.
I'm going to go a little further with that thought process and say that regardless of the reason why, we still have been asked over the course of a couple of years to make up a deficit in created by special education costs, overruns or whatever. So we're not making, so we're trying to make strides in our budget toward good things for education in the classroom for students, and we don't get to do that because we freeze the budget and we don't get to do some of the things that we want to do, that this board intends to do in our budget because of special education overruns or underpayments or whatever you want, however you want to define it. I'm wondering, David's point was we're not unique in Vernon. It's got to be happening in other towns. And what are they doing? How are they dealing with this? What kinds of deficits are they up against? Is their budget process different? Do they do different things when they're in their special education forecasts or whatever? Mrs. Beal said that I'm doing the same thing I've done for years. Maybe that's not the way to do it. I don't know. Students, you can't coming and going, you can't help, but special education is impacting regular education to the point where I find it objectionable. And I would hope that there are ways to think outside the box, to come up with innovative planning, something, so that we're not always held hostage, our budget isn't always held hostage by special education costs.
I think that, if I heard everyone correctly, that the way it was budgeted for this year, we would have been okay if the state had not changed the rules. So we have until April to, hopefully we can change their minds, I don't know. And we will find out more, but that's what we're in the process of researching.
Can I just add one more comment? I think just a couple days ago it came to my attention, Westbrook is $500,000 short in special ed funding. So I think there are other districts in this situation. I don't know if theirs was because of the excess cost reimbursement, I'm not sure, but I know that there are other districts in the same boat. We certainly are, and I continue to look for ways to spend the district's money wisely in order to educate all students, those students with disabilities.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any other comments or questions? Okay, we'll move on. Thank you very much, Mrs. Field. The rest of the report.
Okay, moving on to Exhibit H. You'll note the bottom line of your handout that there's an incorrect carryover to the tuition that should be $320,225 at the bottom line for 2013-2014.
Pardon me, what was that?
There should be a
Exhibit
single
H.
page.
Yeah, there should be
You get a single
an additional
page.
fly sheet.
Right.
It was a formula error. On the original one, there was an asterisk in that first column, and that made that a literal, and so that money was not added going all the way across. So the bottom box on the right-hand side originally said 72,000, I think it says 320,000, correct? Yeah.
Okay, and then I'm going to hand the revenue estimates over to Mr. Picard.
Okay, through you, Madam Chair, very briefly, the Exhibit H, the revised one, shows a total tuition of $320,225.80 that's projected through the end of this fiscal year. The only difference between these numbers and the previous ones updated was a reduction of $3,600 from our regular ag ed tuition line item, and that was due to an early graduation of a student from Ellington, but the rest of the numbers remain wholly the same. Okay, if I may, let's keep going. The next item, very briefly, in the finance packet, budget transfers and amendment requests. Exhibit J is a summary of all of the budget transfers and amendments that we have implemented since we've reinstituted that policy as a board. And the total at this point in time is $906,422.88. I would ask through our finance chairman, Mr. Kalina, and through you, Madam Chair, to have the board review and make a motion to approve the 3 budget amendment requests that follow in the finance packet. The first one is for a transfer of funding from our maintenance department from the painter's salary, which again was frozen. So that is in the amount of $6,608.61 to pupil services for lift buses and vans, and that is to offset the expenses that we've incurred above what we've budgeted for summer school transportation expenses.
Michael, I believe that was 16,000 and change.
I'm sorry, $16,608.61. It's my new glasses, I'm sorry. The next one is a budget amendment request from Central Administration Reserve for Negotiations in the amount of $3,726.83 to our Maintenance Department Non-Certified General Control, and that is to cover the increase per the recently executed Memorandum of Agreement for our new salary schedule for the Supervisor of School Facilities and Special Projects that was approved by the board. It was retroactive payment to the beginning of the fiscal year. And the final budget amendment request is for employee travel in the amount of $2,700 from Pupil Personnel Services Department. That comes from an accounts payable line item, and we're moving it into a payroll line item in central administration to put that in line with the new contract for Mrs. Buell, in which the travel is automatically added to the paycheck versus having to go through an accounts payable process. And that's again in the amount of $2,700.
Mr. Wolf?
Move to approve the 3 adjustment requests.
Is there a second?
Sorry, it's amendment request.
Mr. Kalina? Okay, anybody further questions or comments in regards to these transfers? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, continue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Moving along very briefly, just to hit the highlights, we have in Exhibit K our fiscal year ending 2012 Department of Social Services Medicaid reimbursement. This is the large sum of funding that we receive at the end of the year that coincides with our cost settlement report. We were expecting this check in the ballpark of around $120,000 to $150,000 by the end of December, which was the original guidance that we had received from the state. We had some follow-up guidance when we asked where it was in January, and they said, well, you're going to receive it before June. So they're obligated by law to get it to us by the end of the fiscal year. We found that answer to be unacceptable, and in your packet, we've kicked it up to the Commissioner's Office and the Director of the School-Based Health Center Reimbursement Department at Social Services, and they have agreed to review our filing and hopefully issue us a check within the next 4 weeks.
How much did you say it was again? I'm sorry.
If we're basing it on the cost settlement report that we submitted in the year before, we received close to $150,000. If you recall, to close out our budget from last year, we asked the town to front the funding in the amount of about $120,000. So it should be at least that, and likely to be more. And again, the funding would go to the town when it comes in. The next item, Exhibit L in your packet, is the Connecticut payroll withholding tax credits. And this is something that goes back to 2004, 2005, essentially just cleaning up an item regarding our payroll withholding tax credits. And through communications with the State Department of Revenue Services, we've been issued $4,492 in withholding tax credits that have been available to us for several years that we've taken advantage of. The next line item is Exhibit M in your packet, and that's our semi-annual contribution to the prescription self-insurance account. Again, we are self-insured as a town and a board for prescription drugs. We have to make payments to keep that account in a positive balance. It's an account that the town manages for us, and we have made our first of 2 payments into that account. And this year, through the works of Mr. Ludicky and Mr. Zikis at the town, we've been provided with our claims experience from a cost standpoint, and it shows that we've spent $325,000 or so in claims, and we've paid $495,000 out of our prescription drug account. And the next payment, again, will be based on additional claims experience to keep that account in the black. First Student had submitted to us in January a bill for $30,000. That's the next exhibit, Exhibit N, for excess hours that they had billed, but did not actually bill us for, but they found when they were reviewing their books, according to what they have written to us in an email. This is for the time period of August through November. We felt that that answer was unacceptable and pushed back, because if we knew in August or September or October, we would have been able to change our bus routes to accommodate the excess hours and keep those costs under control. When we pushed back, we did our own review of the books, and it was confirmed for First Student that instead of us owing them $30,000, they actually owed us $21,000. And so that's been a credit that's been issued to our bill, and we'll obviously be keeping a much closer eye on the billing for First Student moving forward. And then lastly, in your packet, is Kerma's workers' compensation claim review. We do that quarterly with the town, and this is something that we hope to share in more detail with the superintendent and myself regarding our health and safety committee efforts to lower our workers' compensation costs and claims that we've been experiencing over the past year. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Carl? Mr. Kent?
Exhibit E is the magnet school exhibit. Could we continue to display in this particular chart the year beginning student counts, please? What you do have is the tuition and the November 1 enrollment. If I remember correctly, we had figures for the beginning of the school year, and that's dropped off the radar here.
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, we will do that, Mr. Kemp. I just put this in as a summary, but we will include the full report in future reports. And Mr. Vernon, I know, will be updating us accordingly as well.
Thank you.
I do believe that's in the back of your yellow folder. At least it wasn't mine. That must be older. Gotta clean out my folder.
Okay, does anyone else have any other questions? All right, thank you very much. We'll move on to item 5.2, State Report on Restraint and Seclusion. Mrs. Auggie?
My question was very straightforward. It appears, except for two other towns, we have a pretty high incident per student rate. I know that there were questions about who's reporting and how they're reporting it, and we should be careful not to make too many comparisons based on the notes that were attached to the report, but it still makes me wonder if the special ed department is concerned at all about those numbers.
Mrs. Booth?
Sure. Certainly, I have concerns about restraint and seclusion. It's certainly not the optimal way to educate students, but we do use that either as emergency restraint or part of an IEP for seclusion for a variety of reasons. Students might need time to regulate, that might be a seclusion. I would, acknowledge the fact that there are a wide range of districts reporting and not reporting. All I can tell you is that Vernon Public Schools reports honestly. And I report all incidents. We take it very seriously. We do what we've been asked to do, and that's an honest reflection of the numbers. In comparison to the 11-12 report, in every single category, those numbers have decreased. So I think that is a positive trend. Certainly, we don't have zero restraint seclusions or seclusions per IEP like Hartford, but we are actually honestly reporting the numbers.
The injuries that are reported, are those students and staff or just students?
Those are 2 students. That's what, right, you're looking at the 2 as a result of the emergency restraint?
Right.
Yeah, there are 2, those students.
Do you report staff injuries somewhere?
Not to the state doesn't collect that information. Certainly that's collected and reviewed through the district safety committee.
Do you have any questions, Ms. Burns?
No.
Mr. Kemp?
Well, it's just the observation that the 357 is the third highest number in the state. That it's curious. I mean, East Hartford is the highest by a huge amount, followed by Darien, followed by Vernon, which is a very interesting demographic shift. So they must be more honest than us, but so we're
No,
third.
they're not. We are honest. There's either honest or dishonest.
It's just a huge number, okay? And when it jumps out at you that we're third out of the whole state,
I agree.
you have to ask what is driving behind that. Also, if you look at the number of students, the ratio of total incidents to the number of students is a little out of proportion. That's 14.9 to 1. Now, most of the other towns, regardless of how many they report, it's more like 6, 7, 8 to 1. But we have, I couldn't find another ratio higher. So we're having a whole lot of incidents per student by a lot.
So there's a couple things I'd like to comment on. One is that East Hartford Public Schools has their own alternative school, which would increase those numbers dramatically. So that's one of the reasons. Similarly, if Vernon were to have an alternative school the size of East Hartford's public school, alternative school, we might too think that there might be additional restraints or seclusions. I think that the other piece, when I look at Vernon, and I spent a significant amount of time speaking with the Futures Education folks when they were here, and they're still finishing up, but talking about the number of special programs that we have in Vernon. So other districts may not even keep those students in district, so they might be tuitioned out. If we tuitioned them out, you would not see their numbers. Those numbers would drop. So, we're gonna keep them in district, we're gonna provide what I consider to be better programs for these students, but it comes at the cost of some additional restraints or seclusions, which seclusions are planned for in some cases. Restraints are never planned for, those are emergency situations.
Anything else, Mr. Kemp?
In the explanation note to reader, it explains how the out-of-state placements are counted. Last paragraph, however, if a student is placed by an LEA in an out-of-state facility and is restrained to school, this RS incident is reported by the LEA and is included in the LEA's incident count. Why would out-of-state students be counted and not the others?
I think because when we place a student in an out-of-district placement in the state of Connecticut, those agencies are reporting the numbers. Out-of-state agencies, I believe we had one last year that was agency placed out-of-state, and I think it's just because Connecticut is reporting on all Connecticut students. So that's still Connecticut's responsibility regardless of what state they live in.
Mr. Clayman?
Just a question. I'm sure that the other districts are as honest as we are. But maybe our interpretation of how we're supposed to report them might need a reevaluation as a potential reason why our numbers are higher.
I will tell you that when we submitted our numbers to the state, there was a point, the window where they were looking at the data, what they call cleaning the data, and the State Department called us and said, they've got these few numbers, can you check these numbers for us? And so we were checking the numbers, and in that process, a question was raised about our interpretation of the law. And so we explained to them We have interpreted their law, we have applied that in the district, and then I explained to them, this is how we interpreted and we applied that. It took 3 State Department people on a conference call with me for about 45 minutes trying to determine how they should interpret their law, which was different than how they interpreted it initially to the district. So you have me as a director, and I am the person that's enforcing this across the district. And so we are interpreting it as it's given to us, and we are honestly reporting what is happening.
Which corollary to that might be is that the other districts are interpreting it a little differently based on their best efforts.
I think Hartford is lucky to have 0 restraint seclusions. I think Bridgeport's lucky to have 28. So, you know, I'm just telling you that we are interpreting it, and we are trying to be very honest in reporting any restraint or seclusion.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much, Mrs. Brewer. Okay, move on to item 5.3, Maple Street School Building.
To start, just an update. I happened to speak with Mrs. Gandolf this evening. She reported that the ballots are ready. I don't know whether they went home today or they go home tomorrow, but the parent ballots. She went from, last time she had 2 parents, she now has 9. So there will be a selection election by the parents to choose 7 for the committee. She has gone from 1 teacher to 3 teachers, so she is going to appoint the 3 teachers. And she has the names, she didn't give them to me, but the names of 2 community members have been brought to her, and so she is making phone calls. They don't know it. So she is making phone calls to the 2 of them to ask them if they would be willing to join. So she felt very good by the end of today. She said, we're moving. So she felt very good about that.
Any other questions on that? Okay, thank you very much. Item 6.0, to review and update the Board of Education calendar. Does anybody have anything to change or delete from our calendar? Okay, item 7.0, opportunity for questions from the press. Any questions? Okay, last thing. Mr. Stansel.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? Mr. Polino. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much.